All right, welcome back for part two of today's lesson on the progressive era. We should have finished the visual you see on the screen in front of you. We talked about class conflict. We spent a little bit of time talking about today. And now we're going to move on to labor unions. All right, and you start to see some new labor unions, some old labor unions. There's a lot that's happening with unionism at this time. A new one that comes up is called the Industrial Workers of the World, also known as the IWW. And they are more radical in their approach. All right, they really see this as a struggle between workers and the capitalists. They're not quite communistic when you think of struggle between the working class and the wealthy class. Sometimes you think Karl Marx comes to mind and the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, but this is a little bit different. They're also known as the Wobblies. How they got that term, no one really knows, not even the Wobblies. But if you hear the term the Wobblies, or you hear them also known as the IWW, they're talking about the industrial workers of the world. And again, this organization takes in lots of skilled, heavy industry workers, and their goal is to try to overthrow the capitalist class. And again, it's a very radical approach. Government doesn't support any unions at this time, so that's a big thing to look out for. Okay, the American Federation of Labor. Let's see if we can move this down a little bit for you so we can see. There we go. All right, the American Federation of Labor. Nope, let's go back. Nope, let's go forward. There we are. American Federation of Labor, the AFL. This is Samuel Gompers. He's got, at this point, the union has grown to almost 2 million members, and they face a large amount of pressure from the National Association of Manufacturing. They do well at this point, but they also seem to have some problems. You've got scabs, you've got strike breakers, you've got blacklists. You have a lot of issues taking place that cause the union not to be well liked by the government. So the AFL, or the American Federation of Labor, is a skilled labor union. They do have a lot of members. They do believe in strikes. And once again, you've got that violence taking place. And we've talked about this in the past. You're not going to see a change in the violence with unions until the Depression, when the second Roosevelt, will finally legalize unions for the workers to join. What I'd like you to do at this time is I'd like you to take a look at Samuel Gompers and the AFL. Read the excerpt from it at this point in time. And again, after you have read the excerpt, please work within your small groups. Discuss what you've learned about the AFL, talk about how that applies to what you should have learned when you read through chapter 21 in the textbook, and then write down what your findings are, and we'll go from there. All right, so hopefully you've read Samuel Gompers and you've had a good discussion with your colleagues about that. You've written some things for me to read, and we're going to move on then. The other thing you need to learn about the progressive era, you can't talk about this time without talking about socialism. Now, socialism tends to be a dirty word in America. Today, Obama is yelled at by the conservatives as being accused of being socialist. And you should have a very good understanding of socialism at this point. It's where it's where the government doesn't own the industries. If you look at capitalism, where it's all private industry, and the government, the capitalists don't believe the government should have anything to do with it. And then you look at communism, where the government owns all of the means of production. Socialism is kind of an in-between. Socialists believe the government should have involvement in a large portion of things, and it also believes that there should be some independently owned businesses. All right, and one of the biggest socialists at the time is a guy by the name of Eugene Debs, and we're going to hear about him on and off in this period of history. He was one of the founders of the the Industrial Workers of the World, the Wobblies, and he ultimately leaves them because they become a little bit too radicalized for him. They're bordering on the concept of anarchy, and that's too much for Debs. So he leaves after that. He's a very strong believer in socialism. Eugene Debs believes that this is the way to go. He has watched what happened to America. He's been around for a while, and he really truly believes that America needs to go this. He doesn't believe that the capitalist model or the Marxist model actually has any value in it. So he believes in this. What I'd like you to do now, please, is take a moment to read through the excerpt from Eugene Debs called The Outlook for Socialism in the United States. Now, this is written in 1900. Unfortunately, Debs will also be heard from again when we get to World War I and we look at the some of the laws that take place in there and the Sedition Act and such like that. Debs ends up going to jail during World War I. But for the moment, I'd like you to think about Eugene Debs and his involvement in unions and also about the concept of socialism at this time. So again, please read them at this time. Stay in your little groups, talk to each other when you're done, and write down your findings. Alrighty, so I am assuming by now, if you've clicked to move on the video, you are done reading on Debs, so we'll move on to our next visual. And the next thing is really, what do the progressives want out of this? And they want a number of things. They want things that we take for granted today. This is what they want, okay? They want unemployment insurance. Remember, if you lose your job in the 1900s, that's it. There's nothing there. They want workers' compensation. People are getting injured on the job every single day. And when you get injured on the job, basically you're tossed out. That's it. You're done. There's nothing else for you to do. Protective legislation. They want the states and the federal government to put in place some laws that are going to help protect the workers from management. Again, this is a big time where the federal government has always been rather laissez-faire. Yes, I know we had the Sherman Antitrust Act in the 1800s. We have the Interstate Commerce Commission during the Gilded Age, and all of those were rough, very first steps at regulating, but now there's a tremendous amount of pressure on the government to start putting in some restrictions and some regulations on business. They also believe that labor has a right to organize. And remember, remember who the progressives are. They're middle-class people. They would not have an easy time identifying with the plight of the workers, but yet they feel bad. So they empathize with the workers. And they do believe that labor has a right to organize. So they support that in this process. They are opposed to strikes, however, which is, kind of diametrically opposed, because the strike is the only weapon the laborers have to get management attention. If the strikers want better working conditions, if the unionists want more pay, if they want less hours, the only way they're going to get that is to get management's attention. And the only way they can seem to get management's attention is to go on strike and shut the business down, which, as you all know, leads to the violence and all of the other injunctions and the government getting involved. All right, so that's kind of where we are with labor and some of the pieces that take place. Again, the question I asked you in the beginning, does labor benefit during the early progressive era, is something I'd like you guys to talk amongst yourselves about and then give me some response to whether or not you think this is the case. On Monday, when we continue this, we'll start looking at Roosevelt and Taft. We'll look at what their administrations do. We're going to look at some of the laws that are passed, some of the legislation that goes on at this time, so you get a better feel for what takes place during the progressive era. All right, so that's it. We are done. If you would be kind enough to give me some feedback on the last question, which I asked you, what'd you think of this lesson? Let me know how it went, whether you thought it was worthwhile and worth your time, or whether you thought it was, just another waste of an hour for a substitute in the upper dining hall. So I would be very interested in seeing your feedback. So please write that stuff down, and when you are done, don't forget to hand your stuff in to the study hall folks. And I thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you guys have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Monday. Bye-bye.